The office was quiet as I sat at my laptop, the hum of the air conditioner and the faint ticking of the wall clock providing a monotonous background to my unfinished work. The day was coming to an end and other coworkers were starting to leave. However, I had a couple more reports to finish, so I stayed late again. I often left the office later than the others because my wife hated it when I brought work home. Finishing work at home was always a problem for her. Because I was often late, I was entrusted with the keys to the office. Either I would lock up or the cleaning lady would do it. By then, almost everyone had left except one coworker, Lisa. Our desks were opposite each other, and she was often late too. Lisa sighed noisily, leaned back in her chair and rubbed her face. Her eyebrows were frowning in concentration, and her lips were pressed into a thin line, showing her fatigue. We looked at each other, and I smiled at her understandingly. "Long day?" I asked. Lisa nodded and got up from the table, heading for the coffee maker. A couple minutes later, she placed a mug of coffee in front of me, holding another one in her hands. She leaned on the edge of my desk, almost sitting on it. "How much more time do you have?" she asked, glancing at my laptop. "Almost done," I replied. "And you?" "Almost," Lisa replied. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed her skirt lifted slightly as she adjusted her position. "But I need coffee. My brain isn't working." I grinned, but my attention was scattered. The sweet smell of her perfume and the sight of her legs distracted me. Lisa noticed my gaze and, embarrassed, lowered her skirt. I tried to turn my attention back to work, but my thoughts were no longer occupied with reports. "You look tired," Lisa said. "Take a break." I nodded in response, leaned back in my chair, and took a sip of coffee. I glanced over at Lisa, who was sipping from her mug and looking somewhere in the distance. Finishing my coffee, I stood up to take the mug to the sink. Lisa got up at the same time and we collided, ending up nose to nose. "Oh," exclaimed Lisa, stepping back slightly to let me pass. But I couldn't move, my legs refused to obey. Our eyes met, and Lisa just stared at me, fluttering her eyelashes. At that moment, I forgot about the work I had to finish, and about my wife, who was waiting for me at home, though in the back of my mind I felt a flicker of guilt. I tried to push the feeling away, convincing myself that this fleeting moment was harmless, but the thought wouldn't leave me, making me feel both aroused and embarrassed. Without thinking, I leaned in and kissed her. Lisa put her hands on my shoulders, gently pushing me back. "What are you doing?" she asked, surprised. I hesitated, embarrassed, but noticed that she didn't pull away completely. Her hands remained on my shoulders. "Do you mind?" I asked softly. Lisa blinked a few more times before shaking her head. Then, almost shyly, she leaned closer. I placed my hands on her waist, and a moment later they moved lower, and I lifted her onto the table. Lisa began to undo the buttons on her shirt, and I realized I was going to be late getting home. My mind was spinning with a mixture of elation and dread, the thrill of the moment colliding with the heavy weight of responsibility. Every button she unbuttoned seemed to echo in the silence of the office, reminding me of the line I was about to cross. I could feel the joy clouding my judgment, but the little voice in the back of my mind questioned whether this fleeting gamble was worth the inevitable consequences.